Good evening, folks. I'm really happy to see that we have a nice little group building here as we speak for on the second of 4 sessions in Artists in Schools Academy that is free for artists and for teachers across Alaska, but most especially in the Kenai Peninsula Borough School District. Here on the Kenai Bunnell Street Art Center has served the district for about 24 years with an Artists in Schools program that provides trained teaching artists. And by that, I mean artists who are trained as artists in whatever media is their expertise. But in our Artists in Schools program, they're additionally trained to know and maneuver the Artists in Schools program, which has a set of policies and procedures that are trademark of the Alaska State Council on the Arts. Alaska State Council on the Arts is, of course, our statewide arts agency. And last week, Laura Forbes joined me to talk about how across Alaska, there's really two different ways an artist can teach through the program. If you're on the Kenai, you can work directly with Bunnell, and Bunnell does all of the contracting and liaison with the schools to help set up programs across any of the 42 schools in our district. If you're from elsewhere in Alaska, you may work with a local program like Bunnell. You might work with the Fairbanks Art Association or the Juneau Arts and Humanities Council, or you may be contracted directly with a small school like White Mountain, which contracts with the State Arts Council and pays the artists. So to learn more about that, we have archived last week's talk at Bunnell's website under the Artists in Schools tab. And tonight, what we're going to jump right into is some exciting resources that are available to schools to provide arts integrated indigenized curricula. And so I'm very happy to welcome Rachel Pioch. Am I saying your name right, Rachel? Excellent. She is from the Indigenous Education Department of Kenai Peninsula Borough Schools, and she's going to share resources that her office provides directly to classroom teachers. And that is going to be followed by a presentation that myself and Candace Blas will provide. Good to see you here with us tonight, Candace. We will be talking about the new Arts Integrated Indigenized 9th grade Alaska Studies curriculum that's available free to schools anywhere. We just completed writing of that curriculum last year. It's archived now at UAA and at a few other online sites. So let us get right into this program by inviting Rachel to just give a little bit more of a background to us about your role in the Indigenous Education Department and to share with us tonight some of the slides that you have about your program. And I'm going to go right into screen share so that you can see those slides. This is my orientation slide to what we're talking about tonight. And here we have Rachel's first slide. And okay.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Asia. And as she said, my name is Rachel Pioch, and I'm the Indigenous Education Specialist for KPBSD. I am based in Soldotna, but I serve all 42 schools. My role is to help students and staff connect to the land on which they live, the history of that land, and the cultures of Alaska. I was just trying to change the slide. You can go to the next one.
Okay, you got it.
So, um, I'm sharing a couple of things that we do for any school. And the first, we actually have curated Alaskan cultural resource kits. And I'm going to go ahead and share, if it's okay, Asia, sites that they can go to. Okay,
Mhm.
so I'm going to,
You want to do screen sharing yourself?
no, I'm just sharing
Okay.
in the chat.
Oh,
I am
perfect.
sharing,
Okay.
so I just, oh, evidently. Um, that way they can go on and see what I am talking about. So we have a bunch of resource kits that can be checked out by staff. We actually have teachers as well as paraprofessionals who check these out. And while they do go from literacy units from Indigenous authors, as well as to STEM kits, we also have art kits. Some of you are familiar with KPBSD, we have a curriculum support center, and that is where all of our kits are housed. Now, there's a whole Alaska art series with Inupiaq, Yupik, some Sugpiaq, but different regions of Alaska art kits that teachers can go ahead and check out, just like with a library. And I'm working on refurbishing those. But the ones that you get from me, the Alaskan Cultural Resource Kits, come with everything. We have classes who check them out every year to sew NYO kickballs. And we have a couple of different projects like that. Also, new the last couple of years is the Chickaloonies kit. If you have seen Chickaloonies, which is an in Alaskan indigenous comic, we worked with the artists themselves to have a unit where students can learn how to become comic book authors. So art's a portion of all that we offer with our Alaskan cultural resource kits. The next slide, we've also been doing a lot of helping teachers have culturally responsive resources. One of the sites that I curated last year is called Beyond Hats and Headdresses, and it's really talking about Thanksgiving. We had teachers like, we're not quite sure what to do anymore with Thanksgiving. I was like, well, you know what? It is totally great to celebrate Thanksgiving. I'm also going to share some other resources as to why we have whole populations that feel like it's a day of mourning, and looking at it from an Indigenous perspective. And I'm always trying to share, especially with teachers, just a little tip that Native Indigenous people are. It's not were. A lot of times in our curriculum, it is were. The past tense is you. So right on top of my website, pilgrims were, because pilgrims were specific people who came to, who docked in Massachusetts in 1620, but their descendants 100 years later did not call themselves pilgrims, whereas the Wampanoag still do. In fact, my mom grew up right next to the Wampanoag chief in Massachusetts. We'll go to the next slide. The one that we are getting a lot.
Am I out of order somehow?
Okay, yeah, well, I could talk about this one too now. We have the Indigenous Language Film Festival. This will be our third year doing it, where we have students, staff, as well as community members can submit short films, usually 1 to 5 minutes in length, with a portion of the dialogue being in an Indigenous language. Now, this will only be the third year. The first year we had 2 films submitted. Last year we had 16 with a total of 52 participants. But it's a great way to start this process. And so I've been, reaching out to mainly tech teachers and those who teach computer arts, digital storytelling, that this is a great way for students to create movies on their own and then submit them for the whole district to actually view. Go ahead and we'll see which slide is next. Oh, okay. So I do go into classrooms teaching um, with Indigenous lessons. I have 4 lessons that I'm offering this year. One is our guts and waterproof clothing lesson, where I go in and teach about Sukpiak and Unangan and Alutik, as well as some Denina uses of animal intestines for waterproof clothing. And then students actually do a small science experiment where they have a piece of gut material that they check and see if it's waterproof. We look at the artistry of the parkas, and it's a wonderful one. The lesson I am currently working on creating is Salmon Life, looking at our cultural connections to salmon to be a supplement to the salmon in the classroom. As you may know, a lot of elementary schools have an aquarium in the front of their building where the salmon eggs are put, and then at the end of the year they release them back into the streams. And so this will be looking at our cultural connections. I'm really hoping the next slide is the other two lessons. Yes, okay. So we'll go back to Elizabeth Brotrovich, wherever she landed. I go in and teach about traditional foods where, depending on the age level, because this one for Alaska Traditional Foods is K through 12. So depending on the age level, we'll also get into other processing methods. But for the K6 version, every child then gets to make either a gudok, native ice cream, so in Dena'ina it's navagi. And then I do go in and teach how to make traditional hide drums for our intermediate and secondary students. And any teacher in KPBSD can sign up for these classes. I do it whole class. So technically my department can only pay for Indigenous students, but we work with other departments to fund it so that all students can do it. Because I did not want this to be an after school program or something that only a few students got to participate in. So when I go in fact, I have, I think 3 drum lessons signed up for the next couple of weeks. So I go in and every kid in the classroom makes a drum. So next slide. No, okay, so so at some point, I also have one on Elizabeth Peratrovich. I don't know what happened with that one, but I do, I've curated resources about Elizabeth Peratrovich because we do have a lot of transplant teachers from the lower 48 who maybe have not heard her story yet and her integral part into an Alaska Anti-Discrimination Act of House Bill 14. And so while we do have full cultural kits for her, we also gave her some, her own website. I also do family engagement, and just as a thought, if we have any educators who would like to, we do always have families who are looking at harvesting and processing and sharing those skills. Now, I'm technically a department of one. And so what I have been doing is, like with my Thanksgiving website, curating Indigenous voices in harvesting and processing, as well as the Cooperative Extension Service. And then looking at, in the next coming years, how do we do regionally based arts integrated harvesting and processing? But that is our department. And in the chat, at least you will have the cultural kits and, oh, good, I have a question. When are the films due? The films are due February 16th. And if you go to the site up at the very top, the Title VI Department Home, there is a whole tab for the, there's a whole site for the film festival. And that is my presentation. It's very short and sweet.
That's fantastic. I would love if you just follow up with what you put in the chat. I wanted to copy it, but for some reason I was having difficulty doing that.
I will email with,
okay, perfect.
With all of it. Yeah, excellent. Because actually every slide is linked with the website correlation, but I will email that all. Yep.
That's so perfect. Thank you so much for just meeting with us to share these resources that are available from your department of one. It's really exciting that the department exists and is putting together these kits for schools, for you know, to deepen the cultural competency of our KPBSD at schools. So I will, you know, as this recording is available on Benel's website, also the links that you're offering, we'll be sure to make those available as well, so people can explore.
And if I could, Candace, I'm really looking forward to your presentation. Unfortunately, I have some sick family, and so I am going to sign off from here. But I am going to watch because I really want to hear about more about Passages Alaska.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank
And
you.
go take care of your family.
Yeah.
Can I
I'm
ask you a
actually
very
excited.
quick question, Rachel? Can I ask you a very
Yes.
quick question? Did you come over to Seward and do the drums with a class last year?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I heard great feedback about it, so I just wanted to pass that along. I did some drumming with
Oh,
kids in a different tradition. I did sort of more of a West African type drumming with them, but the class that did drums with me and then got to build the drums was just very excited about drums and percussion by the end of the year. So it was a great addition to their experience.
oh, I'm so glad. I'm always a little bit nervous because with our drums, I give out mallets. And there's a little bit of a fear when you give 35 fifth graders
Yeah.
mallets.
Well,
So I
I didn't
Great.
hear I didn't hear that anything went awry in that regard. I think they really liked it. So
oh,
thanks for coming
thank
over and
you.
doing it.
Thank you, Jim. Yep, that was in fact they are asking again for me to come over. So
Great.
thank you very much.
Fantastic. That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you,
Take
Asia.
care.
See
All
you
right.
later.
Take care. Bye-bye. So we're going to move on to Passages Alaska, which is a new Alaska Studies curriculum that was created in by the author, the co-authors of the play Alakshka, Alaska. About 6 years ago, Bunnell Street Art Center co-commissioned a play that explores cross-cultural encounters, and it basically centers on the voices of different people of different cultural backgrounds that encounter each other in Alaska, Indigenous voices and non-Native voices. And this curriculum was co-written by myself as an artist and artists in schools coordinator with the social studies coordinator of the Anchorage School District, Jen Romer. At the time, she was coordinator of social studies for the elementary levels. Nina Reardon, who is a now retired UPIC arts educator, and Ryan Conroe, one of the authors of the play. And so we, after touring the play and realizing how profoundly impactful it is in communities across Alaska for students and community residents to hear their voices echoed in the story of Alaska and the way that it can be conveyed through devised theater, which is using a lot of different media to tell the story, from dance and puppetry to writing and satire, so many different forms. We developed this curriculum, and I'm so excited to have Candace Blas here today because Candace is a teacher of Alaska Studies at Stellar School in Anchorage. And Candace will be talking about her experience teaching this curriculum. Before we jump into her experience and insights about teaching the Alaska Studies curriculum, I just want to talk a tiny bit more about the importance of this curriculum. I guess the thing that is most important to me is this idea that is really actually this fact that so often Alaska Studies teachers across Alaska are the new teachers. They're the ones who may not really have the experience of being in Alaska for very long, and they're charged with teaching one of the most complex and significant courses about Alaska to young people, typically ninth graders. Alaska Studies is a requirement of graduation, and it comes up twice in a student's academic life, third grade and ninth grade. So if Jennifer Romer were here tonight, she would talk about the Nest Egg, which is the third grade curriculum that's available through Anchorage School District. Just as Candace is going to talk about the ninth grade curriculum. as I'm speaking, of course, you're learning a little bit more about Alexka, Alaska, the play. Interestingly, its cultural locus is Central Yupik culture in dance and drum. But what we're trying to do now, what we hope to develop over the next few years, is culturally specific curricula, so that we have Sukbiak voices in the South in when this curriculum is presented on Kodiak Island and the Aleutian Chain. We have Inupiaq voices when we're up in farther north in Alaska, and more variants of Yupik culture in Western Alaska and Southeast and so forth. We are going to share a couple different pieces of the play. When a teacher teaches this curriculum, they have the opportunity to interweave scenes from the play. And Candace will talk more about how she actually did that in the classroom. I just want to give you a feeling for how the play imparts voices of and stories of Alaska, both historically and in the present, by showing you a little scene or two. From the very beginning of the play, we have the scene of Yurak, which is traditional Yupik dance and drum. I'm going to try and see if you guys get audio by me just playing it without my earbuds.
Yeah. Here we are. Yeah. I go mana. I go mana. Ik tracht ook maar. I yeah. I go ik tracht ook Yeah.
So that is from the very beginning of the play. And it sets up the kind of multidisciplinary way in which a complex story of cultural encounters unfolds, and through it, by visiting key moments in Alaska's history, we can experience a more nuanced story of Alaska through voices of Indigenous Alaskans and settlers. We're going to watch another little bit here, and it's fun because at least this gives you another window into an art form that Candace explored in her class, and a way in which you can see a third kind of significant voice, and that is this is one of the three main actors here is playing the like Vitus Bering is representing the discovery, the voice of discovery. Just a second, I'm trying to get this one screen out of the way so I can get this at full screen. Here we go.
I can hear a loud noise in the distance. It seems to be coming closer and closer. We take it for the roar of a sea lion, but then we can see men. We had not expected to find human beings in this remoteness, but there they are. Two kayaks coming toward our ship, the St. Peter. As the men paddle closer, we can hear them chanting in a high-pitched voice, which we take to be a friendly incantation or a prayer of welcome, like those natives in our own wilderness in Kamchatka. We beckon them to come closer. They beckon us to approach the shore. We beckon, they beckon, then they scoop up seawater while pointing to their mouths to indicate that we will have food and water if we go with them. Eventually, one of them comes on board. We welcome him with a cup of brandy, which, following our example, he gamely attempts to imbibe. But no sooner does the brandy touch his lips than he violently spits it back out again. And then he is on his way. This meeting, the one with the other, takes place on September 4th, 1741. My name is Vitus Jonasson Bering, commander of His Imperial Majesty's ship, the St. Peter. Soon there will be many more such encounters, but not for me. 2 months from now, death will ravage the St. Peter, marooned on an Arctic island, our bodies eaten by ravenous foxes. My own burial will begin before I die. The sea washing the sand over my wasted body, and scurvy on my gums like a dark brown sponge. Henceforth, the place of my death will be known as Bering Island. We have claimed this vast land for His Imperial Majesty Tsar Ivan Antonovich, Emperor Autocrat of all the Russias. And I am the Russian Columbus. My name will forever be imprinted on this land.
So what I want to do next is, so having seen a couple scenes from the very beginning of the play, you can imagine how exciting it would be for students to be both creating and at times observing moments of this play, which are live recordings from the performances that took place across Alaska a few years back. This is what the curriculum looks like. And Candace, I just want to encourage you to jump in here with me, having utilized this before, and you're working through that with the students. But it's basically designed to be a short semester course, and these are the main 9 themes. It comes very comprehensively with handouts and resources. And how has it been for you so far, just using this curriculum?
It's amazing. Yeah. So yeah, this is my first year teaching, and I was tasked with teaching Alaska Studies. Like you said, like a lot of new teachers are asked to teach Alaska Studies, and I've lived here since I was 13. So I'm from Alaska. I took Alaska Studies in high school myself and remembered how that was, and was nervous because I wanted to do Alaska Studies differently and better than the Alaska Studies class that I went through when I was in high school. So I'd known that Asia had been a part of creating this curriculum, and so it's great. It's like I come to class, I might glance over the lesson, a little bit. I don't have a ton of time to prepare, but the way it's designed, the way each lesson is designed, I can pretty much just it's so wonderfully scripted that I can just follow it step by step. And the students love it. It's a lot of students tell me that it's their favorite class. So it's an amazing curriculum.
That's so exciting to hear and to know that, you and I both went through high school in Alaska, and how weak the Alaska Studies course actually was. I remember coming home and my parents were just sort of horrified, actually, at how incomplete the story really was. And what I'm excited about, I know what you're excited about too, is that it's fuller, it's very dimensional. The students have a voice in it, and they have all these opportunities to bring in community voices. Before we go into much more of that, and we'll definitely have a Q&A about this after Candace's presentation, I just want to point out that the documents that accompany this course are really thorough, including talking about arts and cultural standards to really help schools and teachers understand and defend the efficacy of this particular curriculum. And when you go to, if you just Google Passages Alaska curriculum, it comes right up now to any teacher anywhere. And within the documents that pop up are all these live links, which are the whole package. So we won't go into that too much more deeply. I think that this is just an example of what you're going to see when you pop into any one of these units. For example, Unit 1, and Candace is going to talk about Unit 2. But as you mentioned, the teacher is learning right alongside the students. The idea is to create this really non-hierarchical environment where it's really safe to be inquisitive. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more too, Candace?
The non-hierarchical environment.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's true. I am often like I said, I've glanced through it maybe a few times before, but I'm not ready to go off script. There are times where I am just reading to the class what it tells me to say to them. And it's almost as if I've like, the curriculum is the teacher, like the lesson plan is the teacher, and I'm the one that's like presenting it to the class in some ways. And we all like talk about the curriculum as if it's like the main like presence in the room, and I'm like the adult in the room. I'm like helping them guide them through the curriculum. But yeah, I'll often admit that I'm every day learning with them. And I don't know, the non-hierarchical aspect of it is so much of the curriculum is to facilitate conversation with the students, to get them talking about issues like culture and cross-cultural encounters or different art forms. And it has been an extremely like intellectual class for the students, and I think they really enjoy discussing these abstract concepts, like colonization, and wrapping their heads around it. Yeah, I don't know. It is non-hierarchical for sure, because they know that I am learning with them. And if I don't, and if I don't have an answer to a question when they want more information, we pause and we like give time for the students to research and us find the answer to those questions together. So I would say that's like another aspect, because I often don't have more in-depth knowledge than what is on the page in front of me.
I didn't even necessarily plan to sort of throw down the word non-hierarchical, but yet I think a real critical tool in creating a classroom that elevates students at all kind of cultural backgrounds and experiences is one in which they really feel safe and encouraged to share their voice and invite other voices. And one way in which that's really exciting in the curriculum is this vast archive of interviews where people share stories that relate to each of the units in the curriculum. And the first unit, which is about naming, has 3 interviews that you can see here in the second text block: my Yupik name, the birth of my name, and so forth. And so you might share those interviews in your class, and students additionally might say, this is the story about my name, and speak it out loud, or invite their grandmother or their aunt or whomever, and their background might be Samoan and it might be Yupik and it might be a settler background. It's just the idea that these are Alaskans today and all of these stories matter.
Absolutely. And these topics are really interesting for the students. Like some of them have never been asked to wonder about their name or where they come from. And like they're learning about Alaska history, but they're also learning about themselves too. And like conversations, like in the curriculum, it'll say like 10 minutes for conversation about names or something, right? But it'll go like they'll end up talking for 30 minutes about naming. So it's really like interesting to this age group for 9th graders as they're searching for their own identities as well.
That's so exciting. I want to give you an opportunity to focus on some of the things that you prepared to focus on tonight, and especially because you're teaching and you're actually the first teacher that I've had the opportunity to talk about. And here we are in this just live space learning with you about how that experience has been. And other than the fact it was tested at LKSD, right? And that's how we were able to sort of refine and improve the first iteration of the curriculum. It's really exciting to see where it will go based on what you're learning and how what possibilities you're seeing for the future.
So is it my turn now?
Absolutely.
Sweet. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Asia. Yeah, I'm hugely honored to teach this curriculum. Like I was when I was so I a little bit about me. I'm a secondary teacher at Stellar Secondary. It's a middle school, high school, alternative high school in Anchorage. It's part of the school district, but you get in through a lottery, and the main like kind of philosophy of the school is like student directed learning. And so the students are engaged in their learning in a little bit of a different way than at some of the other like larger high schools in Anchorage. Like they're often like picking the projects, picking the topics that they want to study. And then the teachers also have a lot more freedom to come up with to create their own curriculums, to pick their own topics to teach, pick their own, the books they want to teach. Yeah, I teach English and social studies, and this is my first semester teaching at Stellar, and I'm loving it. But when I was assigned the Alaska Studies course, I was like initially like overwhelmed because I was like, how can I do this right? Like, I really want to do this right. And then I remembered that Asia and Ryan, who I knew from like a previous job, had created this curriculum, and it was just like, oh, this would be perfect, because I trust them so much and the work that they've done in Alaska, and that it would be perfect to incorporate and test it out at a school like Stellar, which is more open to like doing things a little differently. So I think it's really cool that this curriculum is being taught for the first time in Anchorage, I believe. Like, I think I'm the first person teaching it in Anchorage, and that we are like proving the success of it and how engaged the students are and how much they're learning. So hopefully like more and more Alaska Studies teachers around the city will just start teaching it. We did have to like take it through an approval program, my principal and I, to get it approved by the district to teach it. So we've already like set that precedence now. So other teachers hopefully will be able to teach it. Yeah, so the unit that I'm going to focus on to go through with you is Unit 2. And what Unit 2 focuses on is the first encounter between like a Western person and the Anungan people. It's the first time like the Anungan people had ever seen anyone that was white or non-native. So it's a really profound moment, and there's a lot of like learning to be had for the students as they wrap their heads around trying to like empathize with that situation and imagine what that situation must have been like, and then for them to then kind of trace all the impacts of that first early encounter between those two different cultures. So that's what this unit is about, and it incorporates like some of the standards. Like what's so beautiful about this curriculum is that it's like it's art based, and it's talking about concepts that are not talked about in like a more standard Alaska Studies curriculum, but yet it still hits all the like standards that are like that must be hit in an Alaska Studies class. So that's really satisfying for me, that as a teacher, I don't have to worry that the standards are being met. As long as I'm following this curriculum, which has been designed by Asia and Ryan and Jen, then I'm like, I can just focus on the content, basically, because that work's been done, which is really nice as an educator. Yeah, so these are the essential questions for this unit, and the art form that every unit focuses on a different art form. So for this unit, we focused on shadow puppetry. I just finished teaching the unit after this, and we focused on cartoons and satire, and they made some amazing drawings. Maybe I can share those. I'll definitely share those with you, Asia. But they really got into the shadow puppetry. So let's just go on to the next slide, please. Great. Okay, so before I get more into like stories from teaching this unit, I just wanted to give you all a minute to look at those standards that I was talking about. And they're really interesting. If you haven't looked at the standards before, some of them are sort of beautifully written. But what was we focused on, what is covered through the content in this unit, you have them learning about like similarities and differences between different cultures, and learning about like the settlement of the Alaska Native people, which is an important story to be told, and it's told really well, and like the full story is told through this curriculum, where like maybe some other curriculums might shy away from some of the more difficult aspects of our history. This one really like just illuminates all of it. And I remember like some teachers at the school were like, they were scared for me teaching this curriculum because it is just like fully calls out what happened in our state's history. But it's worth doing. And so I'm just glad that I have this curriculum to like lean on to like help me facilitate conversations about the settlement of Alaska Native people, which is not like an easy topic to lead, especially as like a non-native person myself. It's not like the easiest conversation for me to lead because I feel like the class should almost be taught by like an Alaska Native person. But you know, by having this curriculum, I have like the language, the appropriate language and history to like convey to the students. So it makes me feel comfortable in the position that then I've been asked to be in teaching Alaska Studies at my school. So then another big topic that's covered in this unit is discussing natural resources and who owns those resources, and that's a complex conversation that I've really enjoyed having with the students. And yeah, you can see the cultural standards here as well. This unit really develops, you can see them starting to think about other people's experiences in a way that maybe they hadn't before. So truly there are some like aha moments for these kids that I've witnessed. All right, next slide, please. And then what's so cool about this curriculum is not just Alaska Studies, it's art, it's covering art standards, it's covering tons of social and emotional learning standards for sure, because we do get so philosophical. Like even though we're studying the history, there's so many moments where we break out and just discuss concepts like empathy and ethics as well. For sure, the ethics of how Alaska was settled definitely has the students, you know, stepping outside of themselves and imagining what it was like for those like early and Nungan people, and also what it was like for people like Vitus Bering, like just imagining all aspects of those early encounters. Yeah. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. So, was this my next slide? Oh, I think there was a slide on.
Yes, we had
culture.
we'd had the URAC slide, which was that
Yes.
someone is coming, and then we'd also had the Vitus Bering slide, but then we discovered that they were in both of our presentations.
Totally. So what I just wanted to say about the so the two videos that Asia shared, what I wanted to talk about for those and like how I taught those videos was there was a whole lesson on just like what is culture, right? And you ask, that's fine. I mean, I can just talk about it.
Sure.
Yeah, that's basically it. But yeah, like what is culture? And I spent a good part of an hour and a half class just grappling with what does this word even mean? Which as like an English teacher, I really like geek out with them, you know, and I've studied a ton of like anthropology as well. So to talk with ninth graders about like breaking it down, like, you know, like they've maybe never even defined what culture is or actually don't know what it means. And so I know like from the conversation that I had with these students, like they were like, oh, I've never thought about culture that way before. Like, thank you, is what one of the students said. And then we, you know, in defining culture, there was like three ninth grade boys. They're all like sitting next to each other and they all have Nike clothing on, like Nike sweatpants on. And I'm like, do you all know what subcultures are? Right? Because you all, and like in-group signaling basically, and we had this all really interesting conversation, and I was like, you three boys are like sitting next to each other, you found each other, and you're all wearing like Nike attire. So like, do you realize that you're signaling, like you all made friends with each other, you like found each other based off like the culture that you are like expressing through like the clothing that you're wearing? And they're like looking down at themselves, and they're just like, I'm like, yeah, it's no coincidence that you're all wearing Nike. It's because you're all part of like this same subculture, and you're signaling to each other that you have something in common, right? And they're like, oh wow, and never thought about it that way before. And so then once they understand what culture is, then we can start talking about cross-cultural encounters, when people from different cultures encounter each other. And that video that you shared, Asia, of Vitus Bering encountering the Anungan person. Vitus Bering is represented by the shadow puppet of the big ship, like, and the Anungan man is in the small canoe. And they have that first encounter where Vitus Bering offers the Anungan person some whiskey or brandy in that, and like the Anungan person spits it out, and we have the students watching that and then like observing, and I'm asking them as they're watching that clip to notice aspects of cross-cultural encounter. What were different cultural aspects? How were they, represented in that clip? And they point out things like, oh, that Anungan person, like the liquor wasn't part of his culture, right? And that's the first time liquor had ever been introduced to an Anungan person. So you have them thinking about those kinds of impacts of that first encounter between Bering and the Anungan people. And then we go so far as to like the end of that video, you have Vitus Bering being like, my name shall forever be imprinted on this land. We have the Bering Sea, like everything named after Bering, right? And so then we talk about the difference between like the Western culture of like wanting to colonize and name things after ourselves as human beings versus how the indigenous people name places after like geographic features, for example. And so comparing that as in like a difference in culture, and how an Anungan person would never be like, oh, this place will forever be remembered after my name. No, it'd be like more, it's like where the land meets the sea would be what it is known for. So just having them start to like break down and understand differences in culture, even from how we like name places, was just a really good day. That was a good day in class. And we have a lot of good days like that because of the questions that this curriculum has the students grappling with. So that's all I really wanted to say. Well, and the Uruk video of the dance, I have them watch that dance video that Asia showed to all of you, and then they have to analyze like, what about this is cultural, right? And they're like, oh, well, maybe it's dance is culture, part of culture, or the clothing is part of culture. So having them really like break down everything in that video, just which is fun for them too, because not only are they discussing culture and watching these videos, but they're also actually practicing like art criticism, even though they're not like, we're not really calling it that, but they are becoming critics, which is fun to watch. Next slide.
I'm going to go into the
Okay.
slideshow here and then go to your next slide. Here we go.
All right. So then we talk about culture and the impacts of that first encounter between Vitus Bering and the Anungan people, and which is actually interesting. One thing I didn't mention. So, my school is called Stellar, right? And it's named after the explorer named Stellar, and Stellar was on the ship with like Vitus Bering. And so that was just a personal connection that we all had to learning about this part of history. It was like, whoa, the person our school's named after was at that first encounter. So it's always good if you can make a connection like that for the students. So then we go on to like, okay, well, what happened after the Russians showed up, right? And I show these two links about kind of just some of the impacts of settler culture for the students to understand that. So we might as well just go ahead and watch that if we have the time.
Yes.
Okay.
Anhydra lutris, anhydra lutris, anhydra lutris. The skin of this animal is not waterproof. No, no, no. It has no blubber, and yet it lives in absolutely frigid waters. How, you ask? I'll tell you how. The secret is its incredibly dense fur, the densest fur in the animal kingdom. 1 square inch of the skin of Anhydra lutris has up to 1 million hairs. The human head has 100,000 hairs, so you can imagine. When resting, it floats on its back, with its head, paws, and webbed feet folded in on its torso. Now, you might be thinking, "Aww!" But it isn't doing this to be cute. It's doing this to conserve heat. The cuteness is just you! Anthropomorphizing, like you always do. In order for the fur to repel water, Anhydra lutris has to stay absolutely, impeccably, impossibly clean. So it spends a whole lot of its time grooming. Cleaning the fur, removing loose fur, untangling knots in the fur, rubbing the fur to squeeze out water, and blowing air into the fur. Without the air trapped in its fur, the animal dies very quickly from hypothermia. Anhydra lutris lives its entire life in the water. You want to know the common name of this animal? Come on, you ought to know by now.
Thanks. We might as well just watch that second one too, and then I'll talk about how it relates to what we did in the class.
Okay. I just need to find my way here. Like, what did I just do? Ah, I somehow got that screen.
I could try sharing my screen too.
Okay, just a minute.
Yeah, take your time.
Sorry. Like, why does that happen? It drives me crazy. I lost my screen. Okay, I'm going to invite you to share your screen.
Okay, I haven't done this before, so just you'll have to walk me through it if that's cool.
It shouldn't be too hard.
Okay.
I just need to see the list. Here we are. More, make host. Okay. Okay, I think you can share your screen now, Candace.
I just hit share.
Down at the bottom,
Share.
that little green box.
Yes. Open system settings. Hold on. Let me try again. Okay. The green box and then share desktop
Mm-hmm.
and then share. And it says open system settings. Sorry. Just
That's all right. It might just be trying to find your.
I think I just have to say yes. It'll just take me 2 seconds.
That's all right.
Hold on. It's asking for passwords that I can never remember.
Like, where
I
did
got it.
Oh, amazing.
Later. Okay, let me see if this works. Aha.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes, you did it.
I did it. Okay. So then we'll just watch this second video.
Right.
All right. Here we go.
And your volume's all the way up on the
Spring 1742. The St. Peter, remember the St. Peter? Is shipwrecked on a desolate, rocky shore. Scurvy is killing the crew. Survivors salvage what's left of the ship and build a smaller one. They find a small animal, cavorting on the shore and in the water. An hydrolutris, awfully adorable, romping, floating, cracking muscles on its belly. You might say it again. Aww! Perhaps the Rusiks think the same thing too, but then what do? Well, they murder them, of course. By the time they get back to Mother Russia, the ship is piled high with 900 sea otter pelts, and Hydrolutris becomes known as soft gold. Myake Zorota. That's Myake Zorota. The Chinese aristocracy, the Mandarins, are mad about sea otter furs. They'll pay any price for the pelts. Oh, it's just like they'll do a few centuries later with African ivory. Soft gold in China launches the Russian fur trade in Alaska. To meet all of the money-making demand, the Russians enslave the Aleut people, who are masters of sea otter hunting. The Aleuts do the work, the Russians make the money, and they reward the Aleuts with torture, murder, and catastrophic epidemics. By 1911, the Spanish, the French, and the British joined the slaughter. Oh, and the Americans, that's us. The sea otter population drops from 300,000 to less than 2,000. The sea otter, which used to live on land as well as in the sea, changes its way of life. Now it lives its entire life in the water. We did that. We changed the behavior of an animal. That's progress.
It's so amazing.
I'm just trying to get out of this screen.
I think.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, so that's a really powerful clip for the students to watch and then discuss afterward. And the vocabulary that they're being taught is resource extraction, in viewing that, and also wrapping their heads around the impacts of colonization on the natural environment even. Yeah, and we're all kind of just like astounded by that fact. And there's a quiz at the end of every unit, and one of the questions is for them to talk about resource extraction, and for them to be able to know that the sea otter population went from 300,000 to 2,000 sea otters as a result of the like short-sightedness and greed of the Russian people, and how they just annihilated the sea otter population. And so then we have the students think about other resources that are extracted from Alaska, like gold and oil and timber. So yeah, it's just another entry point that just makes this curriculum just so like full and rich for the students to like think about all these concepts, yeah, and how it relates to where they are standing now, and what Alaska is now, the Alaska that they know, and what it used to be like. So let's see, where's the next slide? So that's what I wanted to talk about as far as resource extraction. So we're talking about culture, we're talking about resource extraction, and then we move on to the final project for the unit, which is related to that video that Asia showed where Bering encounters the Anungan person for the first time. And you have the two shadow puppets of the giant ship and the small canoe. And to get the students prepped to start thinking about the assignment is for them to create their own shadow puppets to recreate this first encounter, or to imagine kind of a science fiction version of a different kind of encounter, but something that represents a cross-cultural encounter where two people from different cultures are encountering each other for the first time, and they're allowed to go science fiction with that if they don't want to create puppets about the Vitus Bering and Ungen encounter. So these are 2 writing prompts that the students were just supposed to have a few minutes to write on these prompts, but I will tell you they needed more time. They were so creatively, I did not expect this. And I still it'd be interesting to talk with you, Asia, to why was this so inspired? Why were these 2 questions so inspiring to the students? But so I first have them write about the fact that we have Vitus Bering's journal from this moment of cross-cultural encounter that you saw in the video, but we don't have any record of the Anungan man's perspective, the one in the canoe. And then I have the students imagine that they are the Anungan man, and to imagine what was your experience? What were your thoughts? What were you thinking when you first saw that giant Russian ship? And they were really into it. Some of them wrote full out short stories just based off this one prompt. So this turned into almost an hour of me giving them an hour to just write and think about these 2 prompts. So I've actually been going much slower with the units than is sometimes said. Most of the time not, but sometimes I'll stretch a lesson over a few days because the content is so rich and the kids want to talk about it.
And that's so
yeah.
great, though, when I think about the fact that, we made this 9 weeks so that it would really be achievable if a teacher was under pressure to fit this in. But because most courses are 15 weeks?
Yeah.
If you need to, you can stretch it out and really respond to what the students are responding
Yeah, to be honest, I don't even know if I'm going to finish
to.
this semester. And I mean, that's partially, I'm a new teacher, right? So sometimes I've lollygagged a little bit, but I could run a tighter ship, but I've just been enjoying kind of seeing, because I'm learning so much, not just about how to teach Alaska studies, but just how to teach in general. And so just kind of seeing what happens if I am not making the pace so fast, what emerges when I have a more slow paced class, because then the students have time to really fill it in with themselves. So I'm still experimenting. What?
Yeah, the whole idea of teaching at the pace of being able to absorb rather than sort of force feeding it along.
Yeah, and that doesn't make everyone happy or even my principal happy sometimes, but I'm just curious about slow paced teaching and time for really slow processing, right? And a relaxed environment in my classroom. And just because that's not super stressful and rigorous, does that mean that they're learning any less? Or the fact that they might actually, through that kind of slow paced learning, retain some of that into adulthood, right? Because, we know most of us forget what we learn in high school, right? So I'm experimenting, we'll see. I'm just at the beginning. So the next prompt is, now imagine that you are an explorer of some new place, just like Bering was when he came to Alaska. And then I asked them to imagine how they would be a more ethical explorer than Bering, and without trying to force their conclusions too much, but basically trying to be hey, we wouldn't have murdered all those sea otters, getting them to say things like that. We wouldn't have claimed the land for ours, just getting them to think in those ways. So they pick which of these 2 prompts they want to use as their inspiration for their own shadow puppet show. And I would say most of the students picked the traditional encounter between Bering and the Anungan man, and then a few went science fiction. And science fiction is not the language in the curriculum, but it's what I used to convey so that they would understand, that they could get really weird with it too. And that's the purpose of sci-fi, is to establish these concepts in a different world. So here are some, I'll just end with some images from the presentations that the students did. I didn't have a projector as far as like projecting a light source the way you saw the shadow puppets in the clip, but I happen to have this like old school projector that I use for my own art practice, and that I just love bringing these kinds of like material teaching tools to the class instead of having everything on my smart TV. It's fun for me to like sometimes like bust out my transparencies and like just write for them to experience like kind of like a outdated form of technology. There's something like performative about that the students and I enjoy. This is one of my students. This one was the most detailed shadow puppet that the student that out of I have 2 Alaska Studies classes, and this was the most beautiful ship of bearing ship. And it just shows you how I had them putting the puppets on my projector so that they would then project onto the whiteboard. And then this one, you know, a student, she's actually quite a good artist, but she just went kind of like simplistic with her puppets. But you can see she's doing a cross-cultural encounter between an alien spaceship and some other human type person. Yeah, so that's just kind of like a whole bunch of information that I have. Happy to ask more questions if you have them. But that's pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about. So thanks, Asia.
That's so fantastic, Candace. I'm really, really thrilled to finally get to talk to a classroom teacher who had the experience. You're in the experience and you're learning. And in fact, in this room, you have some very, very seasoned teachers like Susan, who's commenting like, no, don't hurry this process. And she taught for decades. And I think that's fantastic. It's just like you have a master teacher, you know, here. And thank you, Susan, for sharing. And I would encourage you to unmute if you wish and share any insights.
Learn more from.
Well, I threw a couple comments in the chat. I don't know if Candace had a chance to see them, but years ago when I went to UAA, and I'm sure Martin and Martha are long gone, but I did my teaching practicum there in language arts and environmental literature. And like we went backpacking up, you know, Eagle River Valley in October, froze our booties off. But yeah, it was great. I don't know if you currently have a student named Alice. If Alice is at Stellar anymore. Her mom was going to school up in Anchorage, and she could have black hair or blonde hair. We don't know. Alice.
Maybe. Does she go by any different names? Do you know?
Yeah, possibly.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't know. Not in my classes, but
okay. When they moved up to Anchorage, she was my student 6th and 7th grade at Kenai Middle, and when they were moving up there and trying to figure out where to go, I said, Alice, you need to go to Stellar. And then she kept in touch for like the first year that they were up there. But I was just like, oh my gosh, I love Stellar.
Me too. I got super lucky.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're really fortunate that you get to be at a school that appreciates all the points of view and taking the time for kids to really think. And I just wanted to say, like, the way the curriculum is set up, I'm kind of excited because I'm looking at using just maybe a little piece of it within the next month. I have an 8th grade language arts, and I'm going to let them select any North or South American native culture because we spent way too much time on Beowulf, and which they're enjoying. Like they're doing really cool stuff with it now, like rap battles and podcasts and stuff like that, and satire and all of it. But I'm kind of thinking like to use just pieces of the curriculum, like the idea of the stories or the points of view, or like the use of like using the essential questions, maybe to just be their essential question for a research project. Each one of them would just do like, you know, a 2-week thing. And they could choose, like one of the boys that wants to do like a Southwest, you know, American Southwest culture, because he's really, really interested in entomology. And he got all excited that there were spider stories in that region, you know, and then I don't know. And I was thinking I might just do like a Denina one, you know, do my example for them using Denina to incorporate like a Denina story and the history research and stuff. But I was also wondering, like I put in the chat about, I mean, I feel like if a school in Anchorage was gonna try this, Stellar is a great place for it to start. But I also could see that there would be people at Kenai School District that would just go, ew, you know, and would like, I want it. I think it's wonderful. And I could see, like, we have an 8th grade history teacher who's also a young new teacher. He wants to do an Alaska Studies elective, and our principal would totally support it. You know, but is anybody, do we know, like Asia, maybe, if anybody on the Kenai Peninsula has done anything with this curriculum yet?
No, Candace is actually the first teacher that I know of outside of LKSD who's utilizing this curriculum. And actually, my hope would be that, you know, from this point forward, more and more teachers try. And I think it's perfectly great to adapt it in any way that's meaningful. In fact, what I'd love to see happen and where I'd like to go next, just in terms of just concluding this session as we kind of wind down here, is to ask each of you who's been listening, whether you're coming at this as an artist or a classroom teacher, do you see any ways in through the practice that you have, your Jim, the musician, your Maria, the painter, you know, your Daniel, who makes puppets, and other things that you do you see any ways in where you can imagine taking your art form? And this is kind of a segue to where we're going in this workshop overall, because we will go into lesson plans and then application as artists to the state teaching artist roster. You could be composing your own, you know, take on your medium and, you know, your art media, and something that's highly relevant to any school in Alaska, which is Alaska Studies. You could be working with an elementary age group. You could be working with a high school group. You could be looking at Urak and drumming. You could be looking at shadow puppets and cutting out with paper. You could be working with other types of hand puppets. The whole idea is to not diminish the way in which a student might, you know, absorb information, but rather expand it through, as Candace did, creating a sci-fi opportunity. It's just like, what are the ways in that you could see that are exciting to you, and that you could also see could be exciting to a student, to just illuminate the possibilities, you know, of academic subjects. And in particular, I love social studies because you can see that there's all these different ways: theater, dance, visual art, storytelling, and writing, and so forth, to make a very complex kind of intersectional academic area very dimensional. And so I'm just curious if anybody wants to share ideas that sort of occurred to them as they were watching like this, like, oh, I can imagine becoming interested in this, you know, media, or this particular story, this incident, this kind of cultural group. Does anybody have any thoughts? I mean, and I don't, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just more of a discussion point.
Immediately, the opening scene where, you know, with the drumming from the play, made me think, wow, I wonder if, it was Rachel, who spoke first, or what was her name? Whether she
Yeah,
uses
Rachel.
that, because she's specifically building native style drums. I'm not, you know, I'm using djembes, but we do talk at the beginning about drumming and how elemental it is to all human culture and all music, sort of the foundation. So, you know, maybe I could play something like that, but I don't want to steal her thunder if she's already using it with her drum thing. So that's an obvious one. But I wanted to make two quick comments too. And one is that your old school projector thing you were talking about using there, some of us are old enough to remember when that was kind of newfangled technology. It was pretty neat that teachers could put up transparencies and show the whole class. But I also remember a time when, you know, when I got interested in Alaska history, and I read from Bering's journals and Stellar's journals about this first encounter. And I would tell people, yeah, the very first time that Europeans encountered these Aleut guys coming out in their kayaks, they handed them booze, you know, it was the very first encounter, and people were like, no, the bullshit. They didn't believe me. And so the fact that this has made it into a curriculum and kids are learning this as, you know, part of their academics, I think is fantastic, because it wasn't that widely sort of known, and people really said, no, that's bullshit, that's not true. And I was like, no, it's true, it's in the you know, the primary sources. So I think it's great that that's made it into the curriculum. I don't know that I'm going to work that particular incident into what I'm doing with music, but I don't know, I'll have to think about that.
Yeah, the students are often like, why don't other people, why don't we know about this? Like, why they'll say things like that. Like, why isn't this taught? I'm like, well, it's being taught. Like, that's what we're doing right now. Like, they're like, everyone should know about this, you know? So.
Yeah.
I also wanted to say two things, Jim. There's no thunder stealing going on here. This is like, you know, Rachel pointed out, she's just one person. Imagine she's the one Indigenous education department. She's not even an Indigenous person for this whole district. We have 42 schools, you know, thousands of students. It's just really quite outrageous, you know, what her task is. And we need more people who are just willing to say, this is important. It's drumming. This is Alaskan. These are traditions that students, you know, will be curious about and should have an opportunity to learn. So, and however you might interpret the teaching of that, it's.
Well, and if they see it more than once, it sort of reinforces it. I mean, it is, kids are kids, and so you'll have some at one age that'll, you know, you pull something up, they go, seen it, you know, the other but you know, not all kids will cop that attitude. And seeing it more than once can reinforce it. So, oh, I wanted to say too, I don't know if you guys are aware, but and I'm gonna make, and I imagine the woman that I know of is aware of this curriculum, but if she's not, I'm gonna make sure. And that's a park ranger here in Seward. So the National Park Service did sponsor the development of what they called an Alutiiq curriculum, and at the time, now I think they call it Sugpiaq. But it's been taught for years here in Seward and she's actually taken it to Anchorage too by a park ranger, park educator. And so you know, it's kind of a week-long thing, maybe not as many lessons as the one you guys are using, but it goes over a lot of, and she worked closely with some local Alaska Natives. She's not Alaska Native, but worked closely with some local Alaska Natives to write this curriculum. And I think I'm going to definitely make her aware of this resource and see if there's a way she can integrate some of it, because it overlaps a lot with what she's already doing. But it's pretty localized. I don't know how much she's taken it around the peninsula. She's done it mostly in Seward, a little bit in Anchorage, I know. So
That's great. Yeah.
if you're interested, reach out to Kenai Fjords and their outreach team, because they have that curriculum available.
That's great. Susan, briefly, and then let's just try to pass
No, I was just
around a
thinking,
little
yeah,
bit.
that made me think of Leah Eskelin, who's the outreach coordinator for Kenai National Wildlife Refuge. She would definitely be open to incorporating some more of this. And then, you know, the new school in Kenai for sure too.
Fantastic. Well, you all are critical ambassadors. Let's just say, you know, you can share this with other artists, you can share this with other teachers. Passages Alaska curriculum, you just Google it, and all of the things that I shared are available for free. Daniel, it's great to see your face. I know that you've been listening into these workshops, and I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I was one, thank you. It was wonderful so far, and I'm very excited for the coming weeks. The other thing is, I mentioned a little bit last week that I've spent a lot of time in different places, and so I haven't found like a very sturdy sense of place. And I think for me, I'm excited to go through this curriculum just to help ground myself, and sort of see like to know more about this place, because I would agree, like I grew up in Maryland, and we had third grade was the one grade that we spent talking about our local history, and I don't remember any of it. I know a little bit, but that that loss of sense of place is something that as an adult I've definitely have felt, and how that impacts me. And it's really exciting to hear about the work that has already been done, and that there's a really great platform to jump off from and see where else, like you said, like incorporate our own media and our own visions and ways that we figure out interacting with students or a community about this. Because for me, it's like, this is something that like, I feel really bummed that I missed seeing that performance. Because that would have been such an amazing experience for a community to be able to witness the full performance. But being able to have those recordings and have that live on and spread to people that are just moving here, because it's a thing, right? People come, people go. It's what I've sort of noticed a little bit and what I've been told. And it's for me, I'm excited for this idea of bringing us even to adults and community members, because I think there's a lot that within our community we don't have, or I don't, from my own experience, a great way to figure out how to learn these things on my own. And this is exciting. So thank you for all the hard work. I know it's so much hard work to create something like that. And it's very impressive with how in depth it is, because 9 weeks of curriculum is a lot of work. So
I
thank you.
appreciate those comments so much. I'm excited that you're in our community, and you're finding this a resource for yourself, as a new arrival to Homer. I'm also really interested in the Passages Alaska curriculum as an adult learner's curriculum for anybody who wants to learn Alaska studies this way, and potentially teach it as well. But I just think it's a really interesting toolkit for building and strengthening a sense of place, as you pointed out.
And then one thing, just to jump off what you just said, because I was like, oh yeah, duh, is I worked as a GED teacher for a while in Oregon, and this would be wonderful for a GED class. A lot of them wouldn't have necessarily the time to go into that, sort of how, at least how I've experienced how they're structured for adults. But that would be a really awesome resource for, I don't know how many, I think the Ketchikan Bay campus has GED courses, but like thinking of Anchorage and in other communities throughout Alaska, like there would be not just ninth graders, like GED would be a wonderful place to have access to this as well.
Well, I love that idea too, and I'll give you some time to explore the curriculum more, and then maybe we'll be talking about teaching that together someday, Daniel. I mean, that's the thing. Just as Candace is a new teacher, right, learning how to teach this subject, and a person who once took Alaska Studies, but now like is seeing it, so with such fresh eyes. I mean, that's the kind of energy that is so important for GED learners, right? They're people who have a lot of life experience and tend to be bored with the traditional classroom setting, or have really felt disenfranchised in that setting somehow. So maybe this will be the way. And I know that's really that's the secret of stellar success. It's not so secret. It's just that idea really of like saying, to learn in your way, in your time, is the right way to learn. It's, to be invested in your education is the key to, for success. And I would love to see this happen. I think we have a really strong and very approachable campus here locally. So that's a very reasonable idea, actually, to present this as a course. Was there anybody else in the room who would like to just share any comments or reflections as we kind of wind down this meeting tonight? Okay. Well, I hope to see you again next week. We are going to be talking about lesson planning, and we're going to be talking about the part 2 of culturally responsive curriculum with Jen Romer, because she was ill tonight. So just imagine a whole nother thing, but it's called the Nest Egg, and it's a curriculum for 3rd grade Alaska Studies learners that we'll get to explore. thank you again so much for tuning back into these workshops. And if you all have any comments, any thoughts, we're really interested, you know, in how this lands for you.
Could I say, I do want to say something, Asia. Um, I love the fact that uh, curriculum that you made, you know, transcends all of the disciplines, science and art and theater, and because everybody learns differently. And if you're able to attract a child, you know's interest, I know in my own life, if I wouldn't have had art in my high school years, I would have probably quit school. That's why I kind of feel pretty passionate about teaching art, because it was the thing that kept me in school. And believe it or not, I'm still in school, but I am determined to finish and get my BA. And I'm a senior now, and I'm a senior and a senior. But I looked at, I thought about ways to show them this culture in what I do. I'm a fiber artist, and I would probably do a couple different things. I think I would teach them about their native clothing, and how the different groups have different clothing that represent who they are. And also, I've seen in other places, I've been dabbling in botanical printing, and it would be fun to work with kids and show them what their native plants are in Alaska, and do that type of work with them, and print it in cloth, or however you would choose to do that. But anyway, no, I loved the way that you used every avenue to reach their mind as far as what that you were teaching them. So it's wonderful.
Well, and I love, Claudette, how you've thought of two new avenues, which would be ways that we can, as non-natives, provide culturally responsive curriculum through the arts that elevate traditional fiber traditions, traditional plant identification traditions, even printing traditions. So there is so many ways. And when we think about strengthening education, it's making it really relevant and surfacing and celebrating these, you know, customary art forms and contemporary art forms to, you know, make the classroom a place that excites learners.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else want to share? It's wonderful to hear your voices and get your perspectives. Okay, well, thank you again, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.